So first thing I want to say is, guys, I noticed you're wearing the same shirts as the last pod. I hope you've done your washing.
Oh, in Peppo.
Peppa Pig.
Peppa Pig.
Yeah. Peppa Pig. Whatever his name, his new name's Peppa Pig. There's so many edge players who can play linebacker. It's like you don't know what they're looking at.
The one that I'm really high on that I think is almost, you could almost automatically just pen him in, I think. Mike Morris.
Welcome back to the We Talk Seahawks podcast, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you enjoyed the. This person's laughing at me for no reason there. I'm sure there's an inside joke here somewhere. Tonight we're going to be looking at the linebacker prospects at a magnifying glass pod, as we're calling these, looking into the specific position groups and seeing who's available in each, and seeing who we could take tonight. It's the turn of the linebackers. And then obviously we'll be doing a cornerback one as well, / safeties as well. So look out for that as well, coming very soon. But tonight I've got Pez, Josh and Mitch with me again, and it's going to be a linebacker focus all the way through this one. We're going to do favourite players, a few sleepers in here as well. I'm going to kick it off with an Iowa prospect, because Iowa, to be fair, there's about 3 or 4 Iowa defensive players that I'm drilling over this year. Iowa, I don't know what they've been putting in the Gatorade over there this year on defense, but they've produced some excellent defensive prospects, and one of them is my favourite linebacker in the class, and it's frustrating me, it's teasing me, because we're not going to take him because he doesn't fit our need of linebacker, in my opinion. But that is Jack Campbell, the linebacker out of Iowa. I say we're not going to draft him, and I only say that because I see Jack Campbell as an out-and-out middle linebacker. Maybe a Sam, maybe in a KJ Wright role, but I just think his speed lets him down a little bit to play as more of an outside linebacker. I think he took him away in the middle and get him sort of as a run stuffer. He can play in coverage, but I think his speed lets him down a little bit. Sideline to sideline lets him down as the only real knock. But I think he's a real throwback linebacker, and I actually think he's the best linebacker in a lot of aspects in the class over maybe a Trenton Simpson. So he's my favourite linebacker in this class for me. I don't know what you guys think of Jack Campbell, or is there anyone else that you have as your favourite linebacker prospect to start with?
You go for it, Josh. You can go first this time.
I mean, Jack Campbell, I'll be honest, I've done limited research on him because he's just a big boy. I watched him at the combine, and I just thought, in the middle of a field, he will do a job for someone. I saw him do some of the drills and thought, he's a big boy who can move. He's got some flexibility about him, and I need to look at some of his highlights to see if he can hit.
He can hit.
He
can hit.
I can come in here a little bit if you like.
Absolutely.
So first thing I want to say is, guys, I noticed you're wearing the same shirts as the last pod. I hope you've done your washing.
It's uniform, mate. That's all it is.
I see. So Jack Campbell actually ended up, a lot of the write-ups on him started describing him as being elite in coverage, and that is really good. Like James said, he's a little sluggish, perhaps. I mean, 4.65 for his combine 40. He's not a straight line speed kind of guy, but with his ranginess, I mean, he's 6'5", 240, 246, I think he is.
Yeah, something like that.
Just shy of 250, I think. He's an absolute sledgehammer in there, but can also, help with coverage. So I actually really like him as he's not typically a fit for the Seahawks, but I think with our 3 high safety look that we've been playing with, I actually think he works really well, because the whole point of that is to have 2 middle linebackers and 3 safeties that can do a bit of everything. So you never really know who's staying in coverage, who's going to be a box be a box safety or a third linebacker. I absolutely love having a guy in there. I mean, maybe Jack Campbell's in there and he drops back into coverage, and then Jamal Adams comes charging through. There's a real unknown package there, and I mean, if he's gone from being average in coverage to elite in coverage in 1 year, To add to the fact, I think there was a really nice description on Draft Buzz for his tackling technique, which I know Josh will salivate over, which was he's a sure, violent wrap-up tackler. How about that? Violent and sure tackler in one sentence.
Perfect.
I'm going to have to watch his highlights because that's the kind of stuff I like.
I was going to say that's going straight on my my to watch list for tonight.
Yeah,
Jack Campbell.
You'll like that. But another description of him was a pumped-up safety. 6'5" pumped-up safety. So that always, whenever I hear a pumped-up safety or a hammer safety, I think of guys that can mix it in coverage and drop the hammer on a tight end. And I think one of the other things they said on Draft Buzz was that he dominates tight ends. So George Kittle's not going to sleep at night thinking that a 6'5", 250-pound linebacker is going to smash him. So I really like Campbell.
Yeah, I love Campbell. Like I say, I think bringing Bobby back, and obviously you've still got Jordan Brooks. I think, unfortunately, the middle linebacker spot is, and obviously you've got Devin Bush now as well, who I keep forgetting. I think as an out-and-out middle linebacker, we maybe are all right at that spot at this moment in time. I think we're looking for more of a sideline-to-sideline, outside linebacker prospect for me as a linebacker.
You do make a point there, because with Jordan and his role in that team, we spoke numerous times last season how he just didn't have the help. He just didn't. When Bobby went, he just didn't have the help. So it was like, you're the signal caller of the defense. You got to run sideline to sideline, and we're just not really going to help you out with anyone else. Like, you've just kind of got to fucking wing it on the fly. Kind of, I feel like he got given a real disservice from taking Bobby's job to then having to then do his old job as well without replacing that sideline to sideline. Now he's done. Now he's done his. Was it his ACL?
Yeah, it was ACL tear.
Yeah. Now he's done his ACL. We don't know what that sideline to sideline speed is. I think that's the kind of linebacker we're going to be looking for, because you just don't know what, like, it could take away all Brooks' game, and I will be mortified if he doesn't come back. And there's a strong thing that he might not come back the same guy. Like, his whole thing was speed. And now, when we just got Devin Bush in, you got Bobby back, and this is perfect for Jordan just to be able to take his game to the next level with competency next to him in the linebacker position. He goes and fucking blows his ACL. Swear Pete Carroll hates me.
Here's a hot take for you that might be unpopular about Jordan Brooks. It might actually suit us. It might actually be really good for us for him to have had. I don't want to say it's ever good for anyone to have an ACL tear. It is a horrible thing to come back from, and it can end careers. However,
I know what you're going to say now.
We were in a position where we were coming up to his fourth year. If he'd have had a full year, the same as the previous two, where he'd had 140 tackles, etc., we'd have had to pay the man in a big way.
Through the roof.
We'd have had to pay the man in a big way. With this injury coming back, he'll probably have half a year this year. We probably won't give him the fifth year, but we may give him a 2 to 3 year prove it deal, a John Schneider special, cap friendly, probably backloaded with, maybe a void year. We could get another 3 or 4 years of Jordan Brooks at a discounted rate, because he hadn't fulfilled that first round potential that we would have had to pay if he'd had a full year. So I'm never going to say it's a good thing for anyone to get injured. It's not, but it might, if he comes back and recovers from it. People in the league aren't going to gamble on him after the ACL. They're not going to pay him more than we would pay him. So if you love Jordan Brooks, it might be quite good for you, because we might be seeing another 3-4 years of him, whereas we might not have. That's my take. I don't know if anyone agrees with that.
There you go. No need to burn your Brooks jersey just yet.
It'll never get burnt. It'll get put in a frame and a shrine. I didn't really look at Jack Campbell or anyone. The two I really like is Owen Peppo.
Peppa Pig.
Peppa Pig.
Yeah. Peppa Pig. Whatever his name. His new name's Peppa Pig.
Owen Peppo.
Right. Peppo.
Sorry.
Peppa Papo
Peppo, come on.
Papa Peppo.
Oh,
That was a joke. Right. His
Come on.
weight, height, and hands, the arms aren't too bad, but the weight and the height in measurables isn't that great for the position. Is what's weird, because then his span is 87 percentile. What's really weird that he's got like shit hands and okay arm length, but his span is really good. But then his 40 and his 10, his broad jump, his bench, and his vertical, he didn't do the shuttle, but they are all, his vertical isn't, so his 40 is 10 yard, his broad and his bench are all 90 percentile.
Yeah, he had a
His
hell of a
40
combine.
is 99 percentile for the position.
Have you got a stat there for his vertical jump? Because that's the one that really pops off the sheet for me. Did a 40-inch vertical.
67 percentile, what is like high range, but it's not like you just see them stats and you're like, oh, it's tackling 90%. Now I'm on the right track. I'm talking about the right person. And we were just talking about that sideline to sideline and the linebacker, like a bit like what Mitch said about Brooks then about the injury and getting him cheap for a longer time. But I think it also might help him from not having to do that sideline to sideline, so he can focus more on the jobs of a middle linebacker instead of like always having to be the one, always having to be the one doing the sideline to sideline, whereas this guy would fit in like a fucking glove with his speed. Like, he calls himself the freak. It's been my thing of these bloody defensive players podcasts. And I just think with his athleticism and stuff, he'd be really good. But like I said before, I'm not hyped about the linebackers because I just feel like I've not heard anything come out from the Seahawks being overly excited about these linebackers. And it might be something like what Josh said before we started recording this, is there's so many edge players who can play linebacker. It's like you don't know what they're looking at.
It's going to be a matter of what is their long-term plan for middle linebacker, because Bobby's got one season. We've signed Devin Bush to 1 year, sort of prove it. He's saying he's in his perfect position playing next to Bobby Wagner. He thinks he'll be able to solidify a roster spot here. JB, if he comes back, he could be the second middle linebacker, but then we still need depth. With me chiming in with that, I'll give you two of mine because I know one of them is going to be on Mitch's board anyway. So I've got one, Trenton Simpson. I think he is possibly, in my opinion, one of the most polished inside linebackers in this class. I think what he does well is the basics of being a middle linebacker. He shoots some gaps really well. He diagnoses play really well. His coverage is quite good. He's got sideline to sideline speed. His tackling. Now, Pez, the person who writes these reports must just copy and paste, because I will quote verbatim. He's a sure and violent wrap-up tackler with sideline to sideline range. He's an excellent tackler in space, showing loose hips and the ability to break down and contain runners. Which, if you're going to have someone like JB, who's sideline to sideline anyway, he's probably going to be playing more coverage because we haven't seen him shooting gaps. You have someone like Trenton Simpson next to him who's got the speed, but he is also not afraid to shoot through a gap and take out a runner, which I think would be perfect. So he's number one. I won't go into the weaknesses because I just want to talk about the high points. If anyone wants to review them, have a look at the weaknesses. My second one is I've got a very Polynesian flavour to a lot of my my draft picks on these. It's Henry Toto from Alabama.
Oh.
It's a good job Pez didn't pick that one, because there's no chance he'd have been able to pronounce that
Henry
one.
Tutu.
Henry Tutu.
Must be Thomas the Tank Engine as well as Peppa Pig.
Sorry. For me, with with Toto, one of the big things that I looked at as well with these, so people like Sips and Toto, is leadership as well from the middle of the field. Now, Toto is a leader in that Alabama defense. Like every time you see a huddle, he's one of the ones that's hyping everyone up. His tackling technique, sometimes he can get it wrong, which is absolutely fine, because again, that can be coached at the professional level. I think his closing speed isn't elite, but he's got the ability to take out a runner. I just think he'd be a really solid piece to have in there and to coach up. I think if we got him in sort of the late second round, if we got another draft pick in there, if he lasts that long, I'd be well happy with that. He's just a tough guy. He plays bigger than he is, and he's not a small chap, but he's more than happy to shoot through a gap between a guard and a centre, lower his head and try and get through. They're my two sleepers. Well, one of the sleepers, two of my favourites.
Noah Sewell.
Sewell.
It's because they spell it wrong.
So they don't spell it wrong.
Sewell. It's Sewell. I know because I play rugby with a lad called Paul Sewell, spelt the exact same way.
Fucking read if you cannot understand.
Ask us before you sound like a prick.
I've got too much pride. Josh.
Right.
I'm 33 and I still can't fucking read. But anyway.
Mitch, God, come on.
Noah Sewell, like, the knocks on him, what a lot of people have said that he'd be like a great middle linebacker. Now I'm on my bearings. Be a great middle linebacker like 10 years ago. But I just read what he does really well. But then you say bulk, but he's 40 and his 10-yard dash are 70% out, 80% out. So he's got top end speed for the position. And I think about last year and what we struggled at. We got killed by the run. We got destroyed. I think Raiders, they destroyed us with one run play, gassed the fuck out of us. And that's what he excels at. He excels, by what I've read, by defending the run. But apparently that's old school and it's shit. But then this is where this NFL draft buzz kind of contradicts itself, because in that overall rating of him, they have his percentage of pass, like a pass defense, better than his run defense, but then knock him for being excellent at run defense and not that good at pass defense. So you've got to wade through the shit what they're coming out with.
Well, they did it on Toto as well. They said he was great at lowering his pads and bullying through tacklers or bullying through runners or guards. And then they go undersized for a middle linebacker position, can be out muscled. Get a grip.
Yeah.
Just reaching for things to compare, mate. It's fine.
Like what you said, Josh.
Come on, because I think Mitch is champion.
His strengths. And to me, you read through his list of strengths and what he does, and that's to me is what we need. We need someone in the middle. Josh is the man who fucking nearly was in hospital 5 times last season with cardiac arrests for tackling in the middle of the field. And this is what this man does exceptionally well. And I think he could be a sleeper, he could be a steal for where people are saying he's going to go, in my opinion.
He needs a lot of coaching. I think Noah Sewell is a guy that I don't know Josh has watched a lot of because he's keen on the Ducks. And I watched a lot of him because he started off this year being one of my favorite players in the draft. He's so exciting and physical and quick, and he's got this crazy enthusiasm for just hitting people. And he's your typical Pacific Islander. He's a bull in a china shop. But that is exactly his weakness.
As well.
The guy's 21 years old. Right, he's 21 years old. He is big. And he is physical, and he is downhill. But it's like someone's waving a red rag at him where they want him to go at times. You can misdirect him, you can show him the cheese, and he'll just go after it. And then so there's a naivety there with him that gets him caught out, and that's why he dropped from being a first round projection at the beginning of the year all the way down to the 3rd, because everyone's saying he is not ready enough to deserve a first round grade. He's not a starting linebacker.
But I think that's great because, as Josh kindly broke down for us before, when it comes to coaching, He's going to be 21 in his first year.
Yeah.
Very young. And all when I look at it, his weaknesses are all coachable. Like Josh said, it's not physicality what he's losing out on. He just needs to hone his skill. Do you know what we're missing out on? I'll agree with the thing that he's a couple of years too late. If we, and it's going to shock you all me saying this, but if we still had Ken Norton, you'd want him. Because one thing you can't knock what Ken Norton did with them linebackers from back in the day. What Ken Norton helped with Bobby, with KJ. He helped bring them on a lot, and them two openly say that. If it wasn't for Ken, I don't know if I'd be where I am.
If there's one player I wouldn't comp Noah Sewell to, it's KJ Wright, because KJ Wright was a cerebral he was a thinking man's linebacker.
I'm not comping. I'm just saying, for coaching a position, he wasn't good outside of the linebacker position, but as a linebacking coach, he did do good for this team.
Yeah, maybe Noah Sewell actually is a really good draft prospect for the Seahawks, just because we don't need him to start. He could be a special teams hammer. He could be a backup to Bobby and Devin Bush, and he doesn't need to start straight away. He'd be 22 next year. He's still going to be physically talented, full of enthusiasm, very coachable.
Who's the best person to have? Bobby.
But for that reason, he's not worth a first-round draft pick like he was projected at the beginning of the year. Now he's a third, fourth. Maybe that makes him a great steal for us in the third, fourth round. Maybe.
Exactly.
Go on, Mitch. Yeah. Who have you got? I know one of them.
Drew Sanders is the guy. And
what a highlight.
Yeah. Well, just for that one tackle, right? And funnily enough, if you watch anything on any path to the draft, regardless of whether they're talking about linebackers or not, they tend to be putting in that 3-second clip of him absolutely annihilate. I can't remember who it was. It was a running back shooting the gap. It gets absolutely planted into the turf. He's a guy I really like. One of the things about him, you'll see him listed as a middle linebacker. You'll see him as an off-ball linebacker. You'll see him as a pass rusher. I like that he does all three things really well. He's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. I could really see him complementing Jordan Brooks really well, because someone who is that mobile. Sometimes he's rushing, sometimes he's run stuffing. He's quite slender, and you hear the term getting skinny. When a linebacker tries to get through a tight gap in the offensive line as a surprise element, you want a guy who's not necessarily broad-shouldered, thick, heavy guy. So he's a guy we could certainly work with, and he drops into coverage quite well as well. So solid tackler, average. I'm not going to say he's great in coverage, but he can do it, and it's coachable, and gets skinny and gets through the line. The thing that they say he won't do well in the NFL is just being a pure rusher, because he's lacking in pass rush moves. He's lacking in sort of weight and size. But I could see him doing the kind of KJ Wright role to the right of the middle linebacker. Sometimes he's rushing, sometimes he's coverage, sometimes he's dropping into the middle. He just does it all. I like him for that. And violent.
You got a sleeper, Mitch?
At linebacker, there was a few, but I think we discussed them on the previous pod or here, so I'm not going to waste time with anyone else. We've talked about Diabate, and we've talked about there's another guy. Oh, Noah Sewell was actually the guy that me and Josh talked about that I was going to bring up, but we've touched on him as well. So no, that's it for me.
Well, no problem, because I would love to round off this little linebacker podcast with my sleeper, Cam Jones, out of Indiana. This guy is currently still being projected to go in the 7th round. I think that's ridiculous. I don't understand how he's being lost in this draft. I'm not saying he's a 1st or 2nd round talent, don't get me wrong, but I think he's absolutely a 3rd or 4th round talent that's being forgotten about, and is probably going to go in the 6th or 7th round. And if we can get him and pick him up late in the draft, mark my words, it is going to be one of the steals of the draft, because this lad, I think, is absolutely excellent. He does the fundamentals so well. He's talking about guys who who don't need coaching and stuff like that, or maybe require too much coaching. Cam Jones doesn't require too much coaching for me. I think his tackling is excellent already. It's his biggest sort of tick in the box when you look at him. He's already an absolutely polished tackler, doesn't miss many tackles. I think he actually at one point last season led all of college football linebackers in sort of the least amount of missed tackles allowed kind of thing in terms of wrapping guys up. So he's an absolutely assured tackler. He plays run defense so well, blitzing through the box and stuffing runs through the box. And as a smaller guy, when you look at his measurables, and again, this is just another guy where people are going to look at his measurables as a linebacker, being only 6'1", 226 pounds, only 31 and a quarter arms, and he's not overly quick. I think he ran a 4.69 40 or something. So measurables that don't blow you away, but that again, when you keep looking at the guy's profile, it's the one thing people keep knocking him for, and it's like they're just overlooking a guy purely because of the measure. The football isn't played on the math sheet with the measurables and with rulers. It's what he's doing and producing on the field. And if you watch Cam Jones on the field, he tackles as well as any 6'5", 280-pound linebacker. He blitzes and has the speed like an edge rusher. So I really don't understand how this guy is getting overlooked and lost, and I'm glad he is, because if he's there for us in this late round, please, I beg you, John Schneider, take him and cash in your check later, because this guy, I really do. I think he's one of my absolute top sleepers in the draft. Like I called Tariq Woolen last year, I'm putting a similar tag on this lad, Cam Jones. I think if we don't draft him, just put him in the name to watch, put him in your tracker and see what he's doing in the next 2 years, because he'll be playing very well in the National Football League, in my opinion. I don't know if you have any thoughts on him, Mitch.
I do. You've said a lot of the things that I really like about him, actually. One thing that is a negative is his age, because I think when the season starts, he'll be 24, which is one thing I don't like. However, with the projection he's got as a sixth, seventh, possibly even undrafted player, I think it's an absolute steal. To have a guy in there that we just know is never going to miss tackles. The stats with his missed tackles were unbelievable. And if you look through his actual stat sheet, the amount of forced fumbles, and I think he's got a couple of interceptions. He's got interceptions.
Sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles. Yeah,
sacks. He's got two interceptions, 6-7 sacks, forced fumbles. The guy's just an absolute playmaker, and you can put him in there, and just expect turnovers, and I love that. And with a very, very low cost to have a gamble on him. One thing as well, he's knocked a little bit for his size, his physical measurements, but actually, if you read through his strengths, a lot of people are really high on using long arms to wrap up, but he doesn't have long arms. And do you know why people say he has long arms when he doesn't have long arms? Because his technique is phenomenal, and he looks, because he's wrapping people up. He's got these instincts, and he's got these instincts and the instincts and technique that make him look better than his measurements.
Yeah. Sorry. As a quick disclaimer to anyone who isn't watching via YouTube, Josh hasn't been able to conceal his laughter there, because Pez, as we like to do when we start gushing over a player, likes to make a rather crude gesture with his hands, which I'm sure I don't need to explain in any further scientific detail. And we couldn't help but laugh there. We weren't laughing at Mitch's beautiful explanation as to why Cam Jones is a future All-Pro.
Stan's dad pose, just finished by his computer.
I'm talking like that. Right, because we're professional, I'm going to chuck some names out at you now, because like I said, I've not really looked too much into the linebacker position, but a few names that have caught my, just from brief reads on them, who I thought are interesting without looking too much more into them. So Mitch, you're on the hot seat, and whilst I just call them out, if you are disinterested, just simply say no.
I'll just say pass.
I think it's going to be a case of trying to work out who it is that you're trying to pronounce, not being disinterested.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Go ahead.
I'll translate. I'm in the game.
Doran Williams, Said that
Dorian
right?
Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, I've said that right.
Williams,
Right, so I'll just rattle them off, and then whichever one you think is worth speaking about, go for it.
Finish your list first, and I'll circle back because it might not be worth wasting time on all of them.
Dorian Williams, Mike Morris, Ivan Pace Jr., Overshawn, Ventrell Miller, who the Seahawks have had in a visit, and then off the Florida Gators as well, Brenton Cox Jr. That little group. What do you reckon out of that little group? They seem like a bit of a mid-draft kind of clusterfuck.
Yeah. They're all really reachable value picks, aren't they? The one that you've mentioned, there's a few there that I can happily talk about, but the one that I'm really high on that I think is you could almost automatically just pen him in. I think Mike Morris. I think he's already a Seahawk. Ooh, genuinely,
interesting.
He's a guy that
write his name down.
Yeah, Adi Adebowe, we spoke to at the combine, but Mike Morris was one of the second. I think he was second or third person we interviewed. Mike Morris is the most perfect scheme fit for a 3-4 defense or a 4-3, depending on where we are with which down it is, etc. He fits the edge. He fits as a bear in the 3 front, 6'5", 275 pounds. He's a really, really aggressive edge rusher that has dropped down the board based upon a little bit of production. He's had average production and a little bit on his physicals and things, which I know Pete Carroll values. However, he represents outstanding value and a perfect scheme fit. And he seems to do really well instinctively as well, despite the lack of advantages that you get from the physicals.
Because he didn't have a good combine, did he? Just to box it.
No, he didn't, and I think they'll be licking their lips there because I think they were already going to draft him regardless. He's a guy that just made, and I think actually if you look at his college tape and his stats and things, he was producing in spite of outstanding physicals. So it makes complete sense that a guy like that wouldn't shine at the combine and would drop down draft boards. Like if he didn't excel at it in college, I'm not expecting him to do it in a track and field event. Do you know what I mean? It would be silly to expect that to look different. So Mike Morris, 100%. You spoke about Ventrell Miller as well. Correct. Carry on.
I was just gonna. You can talk about Ventrell Miller instead if you want, but I was just gonna throw it out because I've seen his name thrown out a lot, and from watching college on BT and Texas is on there a bit, his name gets mentioned quite a lot. I'm just interested to see if my theory on this player is right, with not really knowing too much about him. That Overshawn, is he just a cheaper version of Jalen Carter in a sense of he had all the hype in high school, had all the hype coming into college, and kind of just run on his ability without making too much effort to improve? Because what I read about him, he's going to be 23 in his first year, but he sounds like he's got the frame to grow his size, which is one of his weaknesses, but he's got the frame to build more size on going into the league. And what else was going to say? And it seems like he can be coachable to become a really good player, but is he just a case of he's just got all the hype and he's let it go to his head, or is he just not a good player?
It's really he's very similar to Sewell in my opinion. He's got all the physical. It's got the frame that you'd want. He's blessed with a 6'3" frame, very broad-shouldered, but only 230 pounds. I think he is. Is he 230? 226?
Yeah, he's something like that. Because one of his things was he's got the frame to build the size.
Yeah, he needs to fill out a little bit, but I think as well the instincts aren't quite there. He chases the play a little bit, takes the cheese, play action and things will have him come in and stuck a lot. So, incredibly physically talented, just lacking in the sort of cerebral sort of. He's not a thinking man's linebacker. He's more of a sort of physical.
So he's not. Yeah. He's not. You wouldn't say he's really a steal. Because I remember hearing his name last year, and he was thought of quite highly coming into the draft.
Let me see where he was projected last year, because I know he dropped dramatically.
Yeah, he's now like 5th or 6th round, and I swear he was a lot higher.
He was middle 2nd round at the beginning of the year, but at the end of last year, he was projected 28th, I think, at peak last year, coming into this year. So yeah, the guy's dropped about 120 places, and that's just because physically he had everything. He just had to mature into the position, and it just didn't happen this year for him. So his draft stock dropped.
Yeah, so is it a case of it could be another like Jalen Carter situation where he's kind of just like?
I'd be happy for us to take him. Like we said about Sewell, like he's got all the physicals for the coaching staff to get hold of, and he doesn't need to start right away for us. So it could well be that he presents a real diamond in the rough to the Seahawks.
Oh, okay.
I don't hate it. I just don't want to see a lot of draft capital spent. 4th round pick on him, I'll be happy.
I cut you off when you were going to talk about Ventura Miller. Is there anything interesting we should know about him, or is he just?
He's a guy I think we want to draft. I know we've had him in for interviews. It's really easy to say that, but I think the thought with him is that we got 2 picks at 151, 154. I think he is likely to be available at that spot. With our three safety look we're playing next year, I think we can expect to see 1 or 2 more safeties on the roster than last year. We've obviously already got the 3 plus Kobe Bryant as well, who I think when we're not playing the nickel, he will serve as depth for the safety core. So I think we will see 1 or 2 drafted, and everything about him screams high value, good fit for us. And again, as we've said a lot on this series of podcasts, a lot of his weaknesses are quite coachable, and his big weakness physically is this like a stiffness in his hips that stifles like a change of direction. But I think we'd have him as quite a downhill guy anyway. So I think he's more Jamal Adams cover than he would be Love or Diggs cover, if you see what I mean. So the change of direction thing, I think that's mitigated in our fit.
Sorry, you get him in as a safety, not a linebacker.
Yes. Yeah, I would.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't have him as a linebacker for the Seahawks. I know this is a linebacker pod, but I can't see. Well, what I will say is that there will be blurred lines next year between what is a safety and what is a linebacker for us. And when you have a guy that's a linebacker that is downhill, decent in coverage, I think they'll look at him and go, "That's a Cam. That is a. If you've ever ordered Cam Chancellor from Wish, this is what turns up on your doorstep."
And on that lovely note,
I think
we've got Peppa Pig, Thomas the Tank Engine, Wish.com. Fucking hell.
Oh, I mean, we do try and provide some form of insight on this podcast, but the insight that we provided on this one is how not to pronounce certain draft players' names, isn't it? But I'll tell you what, we do cater for all on this podcast. So no, listen, I hope you've all enjoyed that. A little magnifying glass look on on some of the potential linebacker prospects that we could be taking in this year's draft. Obviously not a massive area of need for the Seahawks, but as you know, with the Seahawks, we never quite know what they're going to do on draft night. With a load of picks, I'm sure one of them will probably be used on a linebacker of sorts. So maybe one of those is one of the guys we've talked about tonight. But as always, stay tuned. We have another cornerbacks/safeties one coming as well down the pipeline, where we're going to get into all those kind of prospects in the defensive backfield that the Seahawks will be looking at and potentially taking as well. But like I said, hopefully you've learned something tonight, whether that's insight on a player or insight on how not to pronounce their certain names. I hope you've taken something away from this podcast, as we always try and do with you guys. We try and deliver some form of knowledge in one way or the other. But no, thanks as always for listening. You're all legends, or viewing, because some of you might be on YouTube as well. So thank you to everyone who's stuck around for half an hour to look at our beautiful faces, and Jalen Carter, and stay tuned.
We'll get Mitch a camera at some point.
We will get Mitch a camera, yeah. But for now, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.